Hello and welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. Because if you're listening to this episode, it probably means one thing. You already know some English, but when it's time to speak, your mind feels slow, crowded, or completely silent. You know the words, you know the grammar, but English still feels like something outside of you, not something that lives naturally in your thoughts. And today, we're going to talk about how to change that. We're going to talk about how to think in English. Let me start by saying something very important, something that might immediately make you feel more relaxed. Thinking in English is not a special talent. It is not a gift that only fluent speakers are born with. And it is definitely not something that suddenly happens one day when you become good. Enough. Thinking in English is a skill. And like any skill, it grows with the right kind of practice, not with pressure, not with fear, and not with perfection. Many people believe that they cannot think in English because they are not advanced enough. But this belief is actually backwards. You don't start thinking in English after you become fluent. You become fluent because you start thinking in English, little by little, in simple ways every day. The problem is not your level. The problem is how your brain has been trained to use English so far. Most learners are trained to translate. You see a sentence in English, and immediately your brain asks, "What does this mean in my language?" When you want to speak, your brain first creates the sentence in your native language, and then tries to translate it into English. This feels logical, but it is the main reason speaking feels slow and stressful. Your brain is doing double work, and when your brain is under pressure, it often freezes. So the first thing we need to do is understand something clearly. Thinking in English does not mean thinking perfectly. It does not mean using complex words or long sentences. It simply means connecting meaning directly to English, without translation in the middle. And this can start with very small steps. Think about how you learned your first language. You did not translate. When you were a child, you did not hear a word and ask for its definition. You connected words to situations, images, emotions, and actions. When someone said water, you did not think of another word. You thought of thirst, of drinking, of the feeling of water in your mouth. This is how the human brain naturally learns language. But when we learn English later in life, we are often taught in a very different way. We are taught lists of words, grammar rules, translations, exams, and slowly, English becomes something we analyze, not something we experience. That's why thinking in English feels difficult. Not because your brain cannot do it, but because it was trained in a different direction. Now let's change that direction. One of the biggest misunderstandings about thinking in English is the idea that you must stop thinking in your native language completely. That is not realistic, and it is not necessary. Your native language will always be part of you. The goal is not to erase it. The goal is to reduce how often you depend on it when using English. Think of it like a bridge. At the beginning, you always cross the bridge. English to your language, then back to English. Over time, you want to stay more on the English side. Sometimes you'll still cross the bridge, and that's okay. What matters is that you don't panic when it happens. Now, let's talk about one of the most powerful tools for thinking in English, your inner voice. You already have an inner voice. You use it all the time. When you plan your day, when you remember something embarrassing, when you talk to yourself silently. The key is not to create a new voice, but to gently invite English into that space. Start with very simple moments. For example, when you wake up in the morning, instead of thinking in your language, try one simple English sentence. Today is Monday. I feel tired. I need coffee. These sentences are not impressive, but they are powerful because they train your brain to connect your real life directly to English. As you do this, something interesting happens. At first, your inner voice might sound slow and unsure. You might pause. You might feel awkward. This is completely normal. Your brain is learning a new habit. And habits always feel uncomfortable at the beginning. The biggest mistake people make at this stage is correcting themselves too much. They stop their inner voice and say, "No, that's wrong." Or they think, "My grammar is bad." This is useless. But thinking in English is not a grammar test. It is a thinking process. Even if your sentence is not perfect, your brain is still learning to operate in English. Let me say this very clearly. Incorrect. English thoughts are better than no English thoughts at all. Fluency is not built on silence. It is built on movement. Another important shift is moving from words to images. When you hear or think a word, try not to translate it. Instead, picture it. If the word is rain, imagine rain. If the word is waiting, imagine yourself standing somewhere, looking at the time. This might feel childish, but it is actually how the brain works best. When you connect English to images, you shorten the distance between thought and speech. You stop asking, "What does this mean?" And you start feeling the meaning. And when meaning is clear, words come faster. This is especially helpful for common everyday vocabulary. Words like busy, tired, excited, worried, comfortable. These words should not need translation. They should feel immediate. If they don't, that's a sign you can practice, connecting them to experiences instead of definitions. Now, let's talk about fear, because fear is often the invisible wall between knowing English and using it. Many learners are afraid of thinking in English because it feels unsafe. In your native language, your thoughts are smooth and fast. In English, they feel broken, and this can make you feel less intelligent, even though you are not. So, your brain chooses comfort and goes back to your native language. To change this, you need to create a safe space for English thinking. This space should have no judgment, no pressure, no audience, just you. Your inner voice is the safest place to practice. No one can hear you. No one can correct you. No one can interrupt you. And that is exactly why it is so powerful. Another helpful technique is narrating your life in simple English. Not all the time, and not in a dramatic way. Just small moments. For example, when you're cooking, you might think, "I'm cutting vegetables. The water is boiling. This smells good." These are real actions connected to real meaning, and they help English become part of your daily rhythm. At first, you might only manage one sentence. That's enough. Tomorrow, maybe two. Over time, this becomes easier. Not because English becomes easier, but because your brain becomes more comfortable using it without translation. Let's also talk about mistakes, because mistakes are deeply connected to thinking. Many people don't think in English because they are afraid of forming incorrect sentences, even in their own minds. This fear usually comes from education systems that focus too much on correctness and not enough on communication. But your brain does not learn language by avoiding mistakes. It learns by making them, noticing patterns, and adjusting. When you think in English and make a mistake, your brain is not failing. It is experimenting. And experimentation is learning. Think of it like learning to walk. You fell many times, but you didn't stop walking because you fell. You adjusted. Language works the same way. Now let's address something important: vocabulary. Many learners believe they cannot think in English because they don't know enough words. But often, the real issue is not lack of vocabulary, but lack of active vocabulary. You might recognize many words when reading or listening, but not use them when thinking or speaking. To change this, you don't need to learn thousands of new words. You need to activate the ones you already know. Choose a small group of words and use them in your thoughts every day. Repeat them in different situations. Let them become familiar. For example, if you know the word decision, use it. I need to make a decision. This is a small decision. I'm not sure about this decision. Soon, the word will stop feeling like a foreign object and start feeling natural. Another powerful habit is asking yourself simple questions in English. What am I doing? How do I feel? What do I want right now? Then answer them in simple sentences. This creates a conversation in your mind. And conversation is where language truly lives. You might notice that your thoughts in English are slower than in your native language. This is normal. Speed comes later. First comes clarity. And clarity comes from patience. One of the biggest traps learners fall into is comparing their English thinking speed to their native language thinking speed. This comparison is unfair. You have years of experience thinking in your native language. English is still new. Give it time. Now, let's talk about listening. Because listening is a bridge between thinking and speaking. When you listen to English regularly, especially natural, spoken English, your brain absorbs patterns. You start to feel what sounds right, even before you fully understand why. This is extremely important for thinking in English. When you hear the same structures again and again, your brain begins to use them automatically in your thoughts. This is why podcasts like this one are so useful. You are not just learning words. You are learning rhythm, flow, and natural expression. But listening alone is not enough. You need to interact with what you hear. After listening to something in English, pause and reflect in English. What was it about? Did you agree? How did it make you feel? Even a few sentences are enough. Now, I want to be very honest with you. There will be days when thinking in English feels easy, and days when it feels impossible. This does not mean you are going backwards. It means your brain is human. Progress is not a straight line. On difficult days, don't force it. Use simpler English. Use fewer sentences. Or just listen. Consistency matters more than intensity. Thinking in English is not about changing who you are. It is about expanding how you express yourself. Your personality does not disappear when you speak English. It slowly finds new ways to show itself. And one day, you will notice something surprising. You will catch yourself thinking in English without trying. A sentence will appear naturally, a reaction, a comment, and you will realize that English is no longer just something you study. It is something you use. That moment does not come suddenly. It is built quietly through small, patient habits, through inner conversations, through acceptance, through practice without fear. As we move forward, we will go deeper into how to strengthen this habit, how to stay consistent, and how to stop translating even under pressure. We will talk about how to make English feel more natural, more personal, and more connected to your real life. And this is exactly where we will continue. Because continuing from that exact point is where real change begins. When we talk about strengthening the habit of thinking in English, we are really talking about trust. Trusting that your brain knows more than you think it does, and trusting that clarity will come even when perfection does not. Many learners stop themselves right at this stage because they expect a clear sign that they are ready. But readiness is not something you wait for. It is something you build by acting before you feel confident. One of the most important shifts you can make now is to stop asking yourself, is my English good enough? And start asking, is my message clear enough? Thinking in English is not about impressing anyone. It is about understanding yourself in another language. And understanding always comes before elegance. At this stage, it helps to narrow your focus. Instead of trying to think about everything in English, choose specific moments. For example, choose the first 5 minutes after you wake up, or the moment you walk outside, or the time when you sit down to eat. In those moments, gently switch to English. Describe what you see. Describe what you feel. Keep it simple. Keep it real. You might notice that your thoughts repeat the same structures again and again. This is not a problem. Repetition is how fluency is built. Native speakers repeat structures constantly. The difference is that they don't judge themselves for it. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates speed. Another powerful idea is to stop thinking of English as a subject and start thinking of it as a space. A mental space where certain thoughts live. At first, this space is small. Maybe only a few sentences fit there, but over time, the space grows. And the more time you spend there, the more natural it feels. This is why forcing yourself to think in English all day can actually be harmful. It creates resistance. Instead, invite English in, then let it rest. Think of it like exercise. Short, regular sessions are far more effective than pushing yourself until you're exhausted. Now let's talk about emotions, because emotions play a huge role in language. Many learners feel tense when using English. That tension blocks thinking. Your brain goes into survival mode, not communication mode. To think in English, you need to relax your relationship with the language. One way to do this is by allowing English to be imperfect and unfinished in your mind. Your thoughts do not need to be full sentences all the time. Sometimes a word is enough. Sometimes a phrase. Sometimes just an image with an English label. This still counts as thinking in English. For example, if you feel stressed, you might just think, too much, or I need a break. These short thoughts are powerful. They connect emotion directly to English without translation. As this becomes easier, you can start adding depth. You might think, I feel stressed because I have too many things to do today. Notice how this thought grows naturally. You are not forcing complexity. You are allowing it. Another key element is patience with silence. Sometimes your mind will feel empty when you try to think in English. This silence is not failure. It is processing. If you rush to fill it with your native language, you interrupt the process. Instead, pause. Give your brain a moment. Often, the English thought will arrive if you give it space. This is especially important when you start speaking. Thinking in English supports speaking, but speaking also supports thinking. When you speak slowly and clearly, your thoughts have time to form. Speed is not the goal. Connection is. You might also notice that certain topics feel easier to think about in English than others. This is normal. Topics you hear about often in English, like work, travel, or daily routines, usually feel more accessible. More emotional or abstract topics might still pull you back to your native language. That's okay. Over time, English will expand into those areas too. Now let's talk about consistency, because this is where most learners struggle. Not because they don't want to practice, but because they expect fast results. Thinking in English is a long-term habit. The changes are subtle. You don't wake up one day completely different. You notice small shifts. For example, you might notice that you stop translating simple sentences, or that certain expressions come to your mind automatically, or that you can follow a conversation more easily without mentally preparing. These are signs of progress, even if you still feel far from fluent. Celebrate these moments. They matter. Another helpful practice is reflecting on your day in English. At the end of the day, think about what happened. Just a few sentences. Today was busy. I talked to a friend. I felt tired but satisfied. This creates a natural loop. Experience, reflection, language. Over time, this reflection becomes richer. You might add opinions. I didn't like how that meeting went. I was proud of myself. Today, these thoughts deepen your connection to English because they connect the language to your inner life. Now let's address a very common fear, the fear of losing your identity in English. Some learners feel that they sound less intelligent or less themselves in English. This feeling comes from comparing your English self to your native language self. But this comparison is unfair. Your English voice is younger. It is still growing. It needs time. You are not less intelligent in English. You are simply less experienced. With time, your humor, your opinions, your personality will find their place in the language. Thinking in English helps this process because it allows your personality to develop quietly, without pressure. Before you express yourself to others, you learn to express yourself to yourself. Now, let's talk about input and output again, but in a more balanced way. You don't need to speak English all the time to think in English well, but you do need regular contact with the language. Listening, reading, and speaking all support thinking. Choose content that feels slightly challenging, but not overwhelming. Content that you understand mostly, but not completely. This is where growth happens. When something is too easy, your brain is not learning. When it is too hard, your brain shuts down. While listening or reading, notice expressions you like. Don't analyze them too much. Let them stay in your mind. Often, they will appear later in your thoughts naturally. Another powerful habit is paraphrasing in your mind. After hearing an idea in English, try to rephrase it simply. This strengthens your thinking muscles and helps you make the language your own. Let's also talk about pressure situations, because this is where many learners feel their English disappear. Job interviews, meetings, exams, or conversations with fluent speakers can make your mind go blank. This happens because pressure pushes you back into translation mode. To prepare for these moments, practice thinking in English in calm situations first. The calmer your practice, the stronger your foundation. Then, when pressure comes, your brain has something to hold on to. In pressure situations, simplify your thinking. Don't try to sound impressive. Focus on meaning. Short sentences are not weak. They are clear. Clarity creates confidence. Over time, something interesting happens. English stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like a tool. And tools are meant to be used, not judged. Now, let me say something that many learners need to hear. You are allowed to enjoy English. It does not have to be a struggle all the time. Find moments of pleasure in the language. A song you like. A podcast episode that feels comforting. A sentence that sounds beautiful to you. Enjoyment lowers resistance. And when resistance is low, thinking flows more easily. As you continue practicing, you might find that your native language and English start to coexist more peacefully in your mind. You stop fighting the switch between them. You choose English when it makes sense. You return to your native language when you need depth or comfort. This balance is healthy. Fluency is not about choosing one language forever. It is about moving between languages with ease. One day, you will notice that English thoughts appear without effort. You will think, I should reply later, or that's interesting, without planning it. These moments are signs that your brain has accepted English as part of its thinking system. And when that happens, speaking becomes less scary. Words come faster, not because you memorized them, but because you lived with them. So, if you are listening to this and wondering, am I doing this right? The answer is simple. If you are trying, if you are patient, if you are allowing English into your inner world without judgment, then yes, you are doing it right. Progress may feel slow, but it is happening. Before we close, I want you to remember one thing. Thinking in English is not a destination. It is a relationship that grows with kindness, consistency, and time. Be gentle with yourself. You are learning something deeply human. And now, as we come to the end of this episode, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode helped you understand how to think in English even a little more clearly, please take a moment to like the video. It really helps support the channel. I would also love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment about your experience with thinking in English or any challenges you're facing. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes like this one. Thank you for listening, take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.